So the astrology of the week of 8 November 2021 through 14 November 2021 is a deep-seated confrontation that is probably happening this week, maybe collectively, maybe interpersonally, where we have these kind of deep-seated parts of ourselves and parts of life that are in confrontation, that are pushing against each other. And this is the week where Mars in Scorpio will perfect that square with Saturn in Aquarius. And so it's time to maybe unwillingly confront deep-seated conditions of our lives. Hey everyone, when I was recording this video, there was it's some kind of meter that's right outside of my apartment, and it makes this kind of tinging noise, and it's there in the background. You can hear this kind of buzz. And I'm not going to re-record the video. I'm just going to keep this week's astrology with this. Hopefully your ear will adjust to it and it won't be too bad for you. But I just wanted to give you a heads up. That's what that noise is. And it ends about 2/3 through the video. Let's dive into the aspects. Let's look at what's happening this week. I'm astrologer S.J. Anderson. Welcome here to my channel. I talk about the astrology every week. Talk about other things. I'll release periodic videos about astrology unrelated to the week. Astrology or to the astrology as it unfolds. And that's one of the best things actually about being an astrologer, is the examination of time, the nature of time, the quality of time. That's what we do, is that we look at what is the meaning and the flavor and the kind of tenor of the moment. How does that shift when the planets shift in the sky? And we have an ancient tradition that goes back thousands of years, probably, I mean, as far back as human beings were on this earth, actually, because in its most fundamental form, astrology is simply noticing. And you notice what's up there, and then you notice what's down here, and you start making correlation and connection. So as long as humans have been sentient and have been noticers of the sky, we've had astrologers. It goes all the way back. And you know, our contemporary forms of astrology are very, very good, because we've built on long traditions of practitioners. Our current records go back, into, maybe Coptic texts in the before the BC time. I say before Christ, but I don't think that's what they say. Before the Common Era, maybe the first 500 years of the Common Era. We have Sumerian tablets, which go back even maybe farther than that, but around that same zone of time. So we have a whole a stack of astrological tradition that contemporary practitioners work from. Now, I'm a Hellenistic informed astrologer, but I use various modern and contemporary and techniques that would be kind of excluded by other traditionalists. We're all different. All practitioners have their own unique blend of what they pull from to make their astrology. So welcome to my astrology. Again, my name is S.J. Anderson. And what I'll do in the video is I'm going to first walk through planetary aspects this week. We'll look at the planets, and then the second thing I'll do is look at the moon. We see how the moon changes, because the moon is always changing. It's of the traditional planets, the fastest changing planet. It's constantly moving and activating things in the sky. Third thing I'm going to do is look at two charts I've pulled out this week that I think are maybe necessary to understand what's happening. And then finally, I'm going to pull one tarot cartomancy card. That's something else I've done for many, many years. Try to add some symbols to how we want to dig into the week, add an additional maybe flavor into the mix. So that's what this video will bring. And just to continue a little bit on this introduction, I mean, I think it's important to think about and situate ourselves as astrological practitioners, actually. That's why I was talking about what I was talking about earlier. There's a lineage, it's directly passed down, one astrologer to the next. I mean, I have a teacher. Chris Brennan is my main teacher. He's on YouTube, extremely popular. Many of you probably know him. I studied with him a number of years back, but I've got other teachers that have influenced me. But it's a direct transmission. I like being transmitted through books, having astrology transmitted through books. I think it's one of the most potent ways to transmit. That's why I'm focused more on writing right now as a way to keep a transmission alive. And when we think about those ancient texts, it's all textual, right? That's how we have, like I was mentioning earlier, cuneiform tablets, that's textual, Coptic textual. We have the Hellenistic tradition where we start having Greek texts. So, it's sometimes we think of astrology as something that's like a fun in a game, that we open up a paper and we read a horoscope and we laugh with our friends, but no, there's a directly transmitted ancient tradition of practitioners. And the noticing I was describing, it can be very powerful to help us have epiphany and understanding and depth of who we are, awareness around our true nature. So I take it very seriously. And so that's just the context of what I'm doing here. I mean, where we are in the astrology is that we are building into this Mars-Saturn square that will perfect this week, right? That's the big story this week. But in the context of an eclipse season that comes for the next syzygy, right? The moon is waxing now into a Taurus eclipse on the fixed star Algol, the notorious fixed star Algol. We're going to have about a month long of an intensity of eclipse season, fated beginnings and endings, where our lives may take on an intensity, and they may take on a sense of being pulled by other forces. So we're moving into that collectively and personally. And then we come to the end of 2021 and the end of this epic Jupiter-Saturn co-presence that we've had since December 2019, where Jupiter and Saturn have been traveling in the same signs. And when that finally completes at the end of the year, I think we will finally get some shifts around this collective narrative that's defined everything since late 2019, early 2020. And so I'm very optimistic for 2022 and 2023. I think that we'll begin to come out of this period of malaise and restriction and have the experience of what it'll be like to be a human being in the third decade of the 21st century. So very exciting times. Let's move now into just this week, and let's try to bring this week into that context and check out what's happening with the planets. And so right here we've got this week, if you just look at the top here of the aspects that are happening this week, it's 3 planets are defining this week: Mercury, Mars, and Saturn. And so when you have 3 planets so dominant in terms of the perfected aspects in the moment of time, that's the one thing that what we would do to start examining that is understanding what those planets are separately, and then try to combine their energies through significations. It's the exploration and the combination of planetary signification, the mixing of planetary energy to begin, telling narratives or stories or labeling what's happening in our lives. And like I say here, these are the big players: Mercury, Mars, and Saturn. And so we focus on these combinations here. We've got Mercury with Mars. So I'm going to focus on, so generally we can combine the significations, but then we can look at where they're configured in the sky. In this case, we have Mercury and Mars together in Scorpio, very close. And then we have Saturn and Aquarius making that square. So if we just focus on Mercury and Mars, we can explore, what does that mean? Well, Mercury separately, it's the mental component, it's the intellectual component, it's the planning, it's the identification through language, it's the fun, the play, the youth, the brothers, the sisters, the siblings. It's the analysis, the linguistic analysis, the writing, the speaking. Mercury encompasses many things. You take that and then you inject it with Mars, or maybe you inject Mars into Mercury, because Mars rules Scorpio. We're in Mars's domain. And what's Mars? It's action, force, power, violence, riots, sex, the kind of torrid love affairs we can have. It is, the power of wanting to create things with force and dynamism. Mars is a very, very interesting. I'd say out of all the planets, I like them all, but I'd say Mars is up there for me in terms of its necessity in life. Now, in our charts, some people are more Mars-oriented. I have a very strong Mars in my natal chart, and I'm born at night, which gives that Mars extra potency. It makes sense why I have a great affinity for Mars. Others probably are maybe more averse to Mars, and they're liking Saturn. The good thing about, and I'm here picking between Mars and Saturn because those are the planets that get the worst reputation, but some of us have a real strength with and can utilize those energies very, very well. The good thing about this week is we have Mars and Saturn both activated, and so if you're more of a Saturn person, you can rely on Saturn being so powerful in Aquarius. And what would that be? Well, I've talked about this at length, I think even in the last video, but it's the structure, the power of force of rule sets, and of the kind of strictly enforced, immovable things that are in our lives. And I think I've been looking at Saturn and Aquarius against the backdrop of the reality changes that have happened since Saturn entered Aquarius in March 2020. it's one of the best ways to do planetary significations. I can go into the text and give you the laundry list like I just did for Mars and Mercury. For Saturn, a few of those: coldness, separation, isolation, poverty, work the land, basically toil, a discipline, eminence that comes from discipline. There's that side of Saturn. But when we have a transit that we're living through, and it's been so clear and stark what Saturn and Aquarius has brought to reality, and that is to say the digitized new reality we're in. They even have a name for it. I think a lot of leaders, world leaders and things, new normal. But we clearly know, and then we each have an individual relationship with those changes. Like my life, I'm doing videos, I've done YouTube all during this time. I'm now digitized, everything I do is online. I have my particular implementation of this new Saturnine structure that will probably be here for a very, very long time. That's why I've been telling clients and telling a lot of people, get online. You've got to, because all of activity is happening through the net now, more so than it ever has. Now there's things you can do outside of it, but for most people, or for a lot of people, this is kind of the new form of the global interactive kind of structure, is the internet and Zoom. I remember I've talked about this some, but right when Saturn ingressed into Aquarius, March 2020, that moment, it was like, many astrologers and astrological friends of mine, I think at this time fondly, I think you out there, if you were there, hopefully you do too, but we were all on Zoom. And Zoom emerged literally right in those moments of the ingress as the key technology for communication. I use Zoom all over my life. I'm using Zoom now to record this video, parts of it. So this is how I think about Saturn. What was the new structure in your life? What changes were brought about with Saturn and Aquarius? What are the new things that now are likely to last, in your life? These are the specifics of what Saturn and Aquarius signifies this time in 2021, this moment. And so when we have now this week the squaring off, the Mercury, the action that comes through the Mars that comes through Mercury, the action with the mind and with the words and with the intellect, the tricksterism, that is now confronted through this square aspect, these new rules, the new rules we're in. It's a perfect time with this square aspect to kind of move deeper into what this period of time has meant for you of Saturn and Aquarius and these changes in our reality. And the thing about a square, I think about optimism. I'm kind of sort of optimistic with squares in a way, because they do bring change. They're dynamic. They force changes. They force action. Mars is action. Mercury is a style of action when it combines with Mars. But they're also, we have to say, can be challenging. You can feel blocked. You can feel, especially with Saturn, the blockage that comes from this action of Mars against the square to Saturn. There may be tension, there may be suffering, there may be pain, and so I get excited, like, oh cool, let's act in these new ways. But yeah, this is probably going to be born out of frustration, suffering, and pain, maybe with these two planets being so intense. And then the other thing about it all, I've got we're up against the deep structures that have been built in 2020, 2021 in all of our lives. I was talking about that there. There's a sense of being at odds and confronting changes with required action. This is the Mars that's born out of necessity, the action that comes from Mars that's born out of being maybe locked in or constrained, and then being forced into a confrontation via the square aspect. It's the kind of action we must take to survive. And so I think that is the real flavor of this week's planetary aspects. It's all about Mars and Saturn. When does it hit? So we have Monday's the 8th, Tuesday's the 9th, Wednesday on the 10th in Central Europe, we have Mercury joining Mars exactly in Scorpio. That's about 2 in the afternoon in Central Europe on Wednesday. Later that day, Mercury moving faster will square Saturn at about 6 in the evening Central European time. That is again on Wednesday. So Mercury comes through and hits both of these planets on Wednesday, and then it's only at 13 minutes after we turn to Thursday, so only about 6 hours later, does Saturn and Mars perfect the square. So really it all happens within the same 10-hour period. Mercury hits Mars, Mercury hits Saturn by square, and then Saturn and Mars join via the square So it's actually all contained here right in Wednesday evening in Central Europe and very early on Thursday. That means it's all Wednesday in North America, and it's probably going to be basically early morning Thursday down under and in Asia. So this is where we're looking at this week. It's like, and if you want to think about mapping energies, it's like boom, it all climaxes here Wednesday this week. This whole theme of the week. So look for things to go down Wednesday. I don't know what will happen collectively, but these are not easy energies. So that's to map the specific time there, but we know the whole flavor of this week is defined by Mercury, Mars, Saturn, and their interactions. The last thing I'll say, and I'll say it later, but the fact that this is fixed signs, Scorpio, Aquarius, is extremely important for the theme of these kind of tectonic shifts that happen here. These are tectonic, meaning they're structures that underlie our lives and that are basically dormant and that operate in the depths, that now you get some movement with these tectonic structures. Well, what happens in geology when that happens is earthquakes. So we might be feeling some quake type energy in our lives this week, and that's where when I say a square forces action, that's what I mean, particularly in a fixed sign. We're forced to respond to deep confrontations with parts of ourselves through this action. Now let's move, because that is the aspects this week. I'm going to go into the chart for the Mars-Saturn square in depth, so there's a lot more to say, but let's move now for now. Let's go check out what the moon's doing. The moon this week is that interesting phase of the moon. This is every month. The moon comes through the Saturn ruled signs back to back. That's how the zodiac is structured. Saturn rules Capricorn, and then Saturn rules the next sign, Aquarius. And so we're always getting a double Saturn every month with the moon. This week is our double Saturn time with this moon. And the thing is that, and that happens basically, we have a Sagittarius moon for 2 hours on Monday in Central Europe, and then we shift into a Capricorn moon. So there's not much of this lovely Sagittarius moon, by the way. Gosh, I've been enjoying it so much. Really cool time as this early waxing Sag moon this weekend. We'll get 2 hours of it here this week. But I felt it to be an easy moon especially on the backs of that really rough Scorpio new moon. And God bless the collective things that happened down in Texas, just sending good vibes to the struggles that happened in Houston this weekend. But the Sagittarius moon has been a break, I felt like, from the energy. We're now here this week, so we get this double Saturn moon right away. 2 a.m. on Monday, Saturn moon enters Capricorn. It doesn't leave Aquarius until Wednesday at 4 a.m. So I think that's correct. Yeah, Wednesday at 4 a.m. So actually, I'm going to just check this here. Okay, yeah, the moon is in the Mars-Saturn square. Okay, sorry, let me read that again. Yeah, because the moon is in Aquarius for the Mars-Saturn square. The moon enters Aquarius on Wednesday at 4 a.m. and then the moon is in Aquarius during that intense Wednesday-Thursday lineup we just spoke about. It adds a whole nother level of intensity. This is not your average Aquarius moon. This is an Aquarius moon triggering a Mars-Saturn square. Just like the new moon triggered the Mars-Saturn square, moon in Scorpio with Mars. Now the moon has taken a week or so to come into Aquarius here midweek, and it's another level of a trigger. And Mars and Saturn are even closer by orb. They're exact actually when the moon is here in Aquarius. So the weekend's events last week and into this weekend was just a perfect example of the kind of the challenge that comes with basically the moon having a hard aspect to either Mars or Saturn alone is intense. To have it having hard aspects to both while they have a hard aspect with each other, this is kind of the most ratcheted up intense energy, some of the most intense energy you can have in astrology. And so here we are, Wednesday it begins with the moon, and then it doesn't end until the moon enters Pisces here, 8 in the morning on Friday in Central Europe. And I think this will come as a great relief. And by the way, we have this Aquarius moon transit will have 6 of the 7 traditional planets in these fixed signs. So it's an overload in fixed signs. Fixed sign people, you've had it this year. There's been a couple of alignments and configurations with heavy fixed activation. That new moon in Aquarius back in February of 2021, those summer transits where you had the pile up in Leo and Aquarius. And then now we come into this end of the year and we have this Scorpio Aquarius pile up, heavy duty fixed activation. Fixed sign folks, just hang in. It's been coming up in a lot of my readings. 2022, you're going to have eclipses in fixed signs. You'll have Saturn still in a fixed sign. There's going to be some additional fixed sign activation, but 2023 is when this intensity, this fixed sign pincer with eclipses and with Saturn, and then with this year with all the Jupiter, Saturn pile-ups that I just described, that begins to dissipate in 2023. So hang on, fixed sign heavy people, hang on. It's not going to be like this for you. You might have another year of some intense stuff, but that will shift. Wait for 2023. That's what astrology is so good about when I was speaking about the timing. We understand the nature of the time, its quality, and when that tenor will alter and when we'll get relief from intensity. So hang in there, fixed signs. But this week we get 6 of 7 traditional during this Aquarius moon transit in those fixed signs, activating that square. So let me come back here. And then this weekend transit, this is what I was going to say. Friday, 8 in the morning, Central Europe, 9 in the morning, we get the moon into Pisces, and then we finish out the weekend with the moon coming into Aries on Sunday at about 5 in the afternoon. This Pisces Aries sector of the zodiac, and this is a waxing moon, we're growing into those signs. The moon has come out of its heavy duty Saturn kind of restriction, and now it's reborn here in a way into this Pisces Aries waxing time. But this is a key transit in my view. It's kind of a hidden key transit because you have to know what happens in 2022, that Pisces and Aries are very, very important signs in 2022. April and May 2022 are all about massive stelliums, transiting stelliums in Pisces, and then all of those planets shift very quickly to Aries in May. By late May, we have Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and then that moon transit in late May through Aries, all in Aries. And the month before, the 6 weeks before, they were all in Pisces with Neptune in Pisces. And so this is a very important part of the chart. Remember, waxing moons are about growth, how we want to grow things or add things, partially because the moon is front-running the sun when it's waxing, right? The waxing moon goes through signs that the sun will later go through in the next 6 months. And so it's pointing us, this waxing moon, which is safe from Mars, safe from Saturn, right? Not in a fixed sign, both in Pisces and Aries, to things we may want to add, things we want to grow, not only for the immediate future, but specifically maybe for this 2022 moment that I just described. I'll be talking about it at length, other astrologers will. The Pisces pileup is epic. Once in a generation, once in 100 year, epic pileup of the traditional ruler Jupiter, the modern ruler Neptune, the exaltation ruler Venus, and the triplicity ruler Mars, all joining there. They're meeting in Pisces to basically plan what they want to do with Pisces, and Pisces sector of your chart, heavily activated. April 2022. But this week, this moon is seeding those activations, those future activations, and it comes after a very heavy, intense lunar transit from earlier in the week. I love these weekend moon transits. Some of the best transits we'll have. And remember, this is the last waxing period before a month-long eclipse season. I think this weekend, this waxing moon is one to take advantage of for actions, activities, things you want to do before eclipse season comes, and I will be settling into prayer and prayerfulness. But so that's very, very cool about the moon. I love this moon transit. I'm going to hype it up one more time. Pisces, Aries moon this weekend and into next week. Use those moons. All right, so let's shift now. What are the 2 charts that I want to look at? These are the chronological charts. First is the Saturn square Mars as it perfects here. Saturn in Aquarius and Mars in Scorpio, applying to Saturn in Aquarius and perfecting that square. This happens Thursday, 13. So 0013. That means right after we get the 11. 10 comes into 11. Wednesday comes into Thursday in Central Europe. And remember, all day, the 10 hours before this, you had Mercury squaring Saturn, and right before that, Mercury joining Mars and Scorpio. So Mercury is heavily blended here into these energies. And we talked all about that already, but I want to just point out here, see, this is a hidden feature of the moment, and this is where we start thinking about mitigation during the intensities of this week. See, Mercury is in its own Egyptian terms, and Egyptian terms, the most powerful form of dignity maybe in all of astrology, if you read these ancient texts. And my essay's coming along, I had to back burner it. I want to, it's going to be done, okay? It's just taking a little bit longer than I thought, but when you read the ancient texts, many of those oldest astrologers we have just say Egyptian terms dignity is equal to domicile. So when I see a Mercury so strong here in its Egyptian terms, as Mercury plays such a key role with Mars and Saturn, right away we have an opportunity to use Mercury during this moment of the all day and into this intensity on Wednesday, Thursday, as a safeguard, as a kind of as an additional tool set. It's a sort of ace in the hole, right? To bring our Mercury out. And when I think about Mercury here, first of all, this is difficult transits. These are difficult transits, a sense of being overwhelmed, forced into things. The deep structures of our lives show themselves and force us into action, or force us to confront them. You know, I've been thinking a lot about this week, and one of the things I've been thinking about is just how the fixed signs, particularly Scorpio, implies deep structure of the self, deep structure of the sensitivity of how we feel, how we process and perceive, and then how we react, you know, emotionally. Mars, you might think of the Mars in Scorpio as the reactive Mars, just like a scorpion. If you see them, they're just sitting there fine. You go up and touch it, it strikes. And this is when we strike as a reactive force when we're confronted. But why would we ever be confronted? What does it mean to be confronted? And some of that with the scorpion, it's a reactive, it's almost unconscious. This is it's like when the doctor hits that knee when you're a kid, boom, and your knee goes forward. I remember that little weapon the doctor had. It made me laugh. But we have this sense of reacting to a trigger with our Mars. And then this is that's why it's so dangerous, because it's unconscious a lot of the times. We react to these triggers, emotional triggers, and then we're in war mode. But what I think, I've been thinking about it in this way this week, there's this thing in like the therapeutic communities. Our parents, the caregivers, our family that we grew up with, they know our buttons so well because they installed those buttons. And I'm talking about the psychological and emotional buttons we have. Like there's a phrase, they're pushing my buttons. Well, why is it when you go home for Christmas or Thanksgiving or spend time with family a lot, it's very easy to fall back into the old patterns from childhood, where this family knows exactly what to do or say to trigger the emotional response. They've installed the buttons. And the buttons are the deep-seated reactive forces that trigger us into this martial posture. And another way of saying it is just, and if you've ever been to rehab, I have, or if you've ever been to like a psychological intake with mental health professionals, one of the things they'll give you immediately are things, it's called, or in some of these centers, like a biopsychosocial is this long questionnaire, and they ask you everything about your life and history and family and upbringing. And it's because those early phases of our lives, the familial conditioning, this is the key word I wanted to bring here, cultural conditioning, they structure our unconscious ways of understanding. And that's what I think when I talk about tectonic movement during this week, that's what I'm speaking of. Your familial conditioning and your cultural conditioning. That stuff may be triggered this week. And triggered into where we're reacting from those places. And we're forced to confront that as new Saturnine and Aquarius structures of our reality that began last year and that have deepened all year to 2021. I bring this up because this is where I think Mercury comes into play. See, Mercury is a processing planet, the planet of the process, of the linguistic filtering, and that's why journaling, that's why talk therapy is so good. I just said I've been to some rehab. I've been to a few, many years ago when I was a young man. I went to several rehabs over the course of a few years, and that's one of the things they do. As soon as you get there, I remember one of the most powerful experiences I had. I got there, and then they put me in a room with like the counselor and the other people there, and we just start talking, and they're asking questions my past and deep things, and I was able to articulate for the first time some of the real challenging stuff I had been going through up until that time, and so there was an ability to process through sharing and through language the challenge and difficulty that the rehab environment created for me. And it's a beginning of a long journey. It's not like I talked about something for the first time and then it went away, but there are cathartic breakthroughs that come when we allow Mercury to do its magic. Mercury is a planet of magic. Mercury is a planet of transmutation. It's the messenger of the gods. It signifies astrology and occultism and esotericism and magical practices. Would anybody want to do a magical working or a magical act? Because we're trying to change the reality. That's what magic, one definition is that we change reality from our will. We make the reality conform to the will using magic. I don't really like that one as much as just the magic of surrender to the divine and becoming an emissary of divine, manifestation into the world. But still, we have to use the magical tool set to kind of say yes to these transformations. That's the same, it's magic to talk about your problems, all right? That's what I'm trying to say here. It's magic to write and process your problems, to use Mercury, writing, thinking, talking, to understand the tectonic shifts that we're going through this week. And so that's what I just want to point out here. Don't sleep on your Mercury. Write about it. Wake up in the morning, give yourself 5 minutes. Anybody who's worked with me, this comes up all the time. I say this. Get your journal out and do the free journaling. You can write about things to understand things. Our words are very powerful to help us as we're going through challenge. We can plan with writing. What do I want in the next year? We can analyze the past with writing. What are my relationships? Now we talk a little bit about this Venus retrograde. I'll mention it here as it relates to writing. Look at Venus in the chart. It's a sextile. It's applying to Mars with this sextile, and it is it's greatly supporting the Sagittarius. It's sending the rays back, what we say in ancient astrology, to Mars and to Mercury. Venus is a planet of comfort. It's a planet of connection. And so there's an element here of finding our Venus amidst a time when we're confronted with Saturn and Aquarius. Saturn rules this Venus. This Mars is moving us into deep-rooted action out of necessity to confront the Saturn. But Venus is here. Venus will be retrograde. It's in the sign of its impending retrogradation, 4 months in Capricorn. But back to the Mercury, we're writing to process. We can do that with relationships. This is one of my favorite things. You go through a breakup, heartbroken. Oh, how am I going to get over her? I just bring up my writing. There's all kinds of phases with that. It's not like just get into the writing and bury emotion. No, it's one tool to bring in when it's appropriate. But you can write, what was the relationship? Process it through a written inventory. It's very useful, and it interacts with processing the emotion, I found. But it's one example here. As we're struggling this week, use that Mercury. That's just my big theme, and because Mercury is so close in its own Egyptian terms. And I hope that you take away one thing. How can you write through this? Think through it. Talk through it. Who can you talk to? One of my favorite things in life, hey, can I process something with you? You got a moment. Sit down with someone, listen, tell them your problems. Truncate it 2 or 3 minutes. Or safe port it. Hey, can you listen to my problems for 5 minutes? Yeah, sure. And then you can get feedback from someone. Talking as a way to heal, as a way to process. So that is what I'm seeing here. Now, I have here Mars attacks the fixed Saturn. And, that's some martial verbiage. But Mars is an earlier position here. And I think that the action and the deep-seated martial stuff, this is maybe what will be brought forth more profoundly. This kind of scorpionic response of being pushed into a trigger and then being forced to act. Just try to be aware as you're maybe acting or making choices this week. The other thing, and I've already talked about this, look here, 6 of the 7 traditional, they're all here. Both luminaries are in on this action. We have the first square of the waxing moon with the sun. We have the 2 great planets. So the moon and the 2 great planets are in Aquarius, and then the sun is with Mars and with Mercury, and then this sextile from Venus. It's a very interesting chart. Everything is confined to one sector of your nativity. So if you just figure out where these signs are, you can just look where these houses are. What's going on in your Scorpio, Aquarius, Capricorn houses? Because that's where everything's happening in your life. from an astrological perspective, according to a pileup of transits in the same quadrant of a chart. So, okay, so actually in the same trigon, if we divide this into 3 pies, right, there's 4 signs that are all next to each other that are being activated. So, okay, let's move here. I don't know if I have much more to say about this other than to hang on and take care. You know, endurance is an important strategy, and watch the reactive responses. You know, you don't want to get, so I know a scorpion reacts. One thing about psychological stuff, and maybe this is the last thing I'll say, you know, I mentioned earlier therapy books. I love the books, Mercury's reading. You may want to have your favorite books where you can process at this time. You know, what books do you go to for healing? I see people read the Bible. I mean, that's a perfect example. Like the Psalms are like a magical Mercury act where you can read those Psalms, or whatever your spiritual texts are. I have certain inspirational texts I read regularly that just calm me. You can find like Instagram accounts. There's some that are just posting words of inspiration, but whatever wisdom words that you can utilize. What I was just going to say is that sometimes we don't want to be reactive. We want to be deliberate in how when we're triggered. It's good to note, okay, I want to react, but don't do it. Pause. Then you can use your Mars-Mercury combination of strategic action. And there might be a time this week where it's don't act when you're in this max triggering state. Wait and maybe transmute that desire to act into some planning. Use this Mercury and then act when it's more appropriate, like in the weekend when we have that waxing moon. That might be the time to respond. It's a better moon in terms of electional astrology. So, okay, that's what I want to say about this chart. A lot in this chart. It's a heavy chart. It defines much of this moment we're in. We've been building up to this, and now we're going to be going into eclipse season. This will give way to eclipse season. Even though Mars and Saturn will still be by sign square, and sign-based aspects are still active, the themes will still linger until mid-December when Mars enters Scorpio. So this isn't over after this week. So, okay, let's move. This is the transit of the week chart, the Pisces moon. Early degrees applying to exaltation ruler Venus. Now there's an Aries moon chart, which will definitely be my transit of the week next week. I already know because I've been looking at this Aries moon for months. So we're going to get a double whammy this weekend, and then that Monday, Tuesday next week with the Aries moon. It's a lot of good energy coming right after that intensity. And so, but this Pisces moon, the reason why I picked it, the Aries moon, it's not the best Aries moon until like next week. But this Pisces moon, if you could look at the early degrees, you've got the moon applying to its exaltation ruler Venus. I like Venus in Capricorn. And by the way, the moon in Capricorn, I didn't share that, but I had on my transits there. The moon and Venus are both the triplicity rulers of Capricorn. And so when that moon is in Capricorn early in the week, this week, you have, whether you're at daytime or nighttime, you'll have the triplicity ruler of Capricorn activated in Capricorn. That might help ease that Capricorn moon, and it adds to Venus's power in Capricorn here as we're preparing for the retrograde. I think that's Monday and Tuesday. Use this Capricorn moon, you know, to plan your Venus retrograde, to look at it. I was tweeting just yesterday about the dates. So 2013, 2014, we had a similar retrograde Venus in Capricorn right around the exact dates. I think it was 2 days off. It took place all in Capricorn. So you're looking at December, January 2013, 2014. You might want to start thinking about, go back and review. I actually went to my Gmail and just said what was going on in my life at that time, try to get a better sense than my memory. And it's good. I feel much more prepared for this retrograde, knowing that I can examine December 2013, January 2014 for clues and hints about what this Venus retrograde might be like because of an exact similar Venus retrograde and back then. But that moon transit this week might be a time where that's a good time for it, because you've got the moon blending and mixing those two triplicity rulers in Capricorn, the sign of where the activity will be for Venus's retrograde later this year, December, January. So anyway, I just want to come back here. What happens now with my transit of the week, and this transit of the week, is that in these early degrees, you see the moon will be applying to this sextile with Venus. And I like that we have Pisces and Capricorn as the two dominant signs here. This moon is averse to Saturn. It is trine Mars, and it is square the nodes, but by the time you get in the 5th degree here, you're separating from the nodes and from the south bending. That's the one thing about this transit, you do have some of that nodal vibe, which brings it to kind of a strangeness and weirdness. But, you know, if you wait until the moon passes Venus, there's just not as much happening in these later degrees. I'll take this direct application to Venus as close as you can get it. I'm lucky where I am. I can get the moon in the 10th house near the midheaven, closely applying to this Venus. And that's a cool transit just to use for things you want to do. Remember, this isn't an election. You have to pick an astrological election. It's a whole different set of questions, and it's dependent on your location. All I can do in this video is look at these kind of these degrees of where the moon might be and just offer you good energy. It's a good energy. And yeah, I would do some action here. Sometimes with electional astrology, we don't pick an exact election. We can't, or we don't have the skills for it, or we just say, some people don't know when they're going to have to act during a period of time. So we do use the moon. We say, well, listen, the moon will be in well configured by sign for these 3 or 4 days. Try to act during those days. And that's what I can offer you in this video is, yeah, starting on Monday, 9 a.m. in Central Europe, and then all through these 2 transits. The reason why I like the Aries moon is that you've got the very powerful Mars. And that's one of the fundamental principles of electional astrology. The ruler of the moon, it needs to be strong, ideally by some form of dignity that's nice, and what better than a domiciled Mars. So I think this Aries moon is more geared toward some of the more traditional electional stuff, but we don't get it until next week. So anyhow, my transit of the week, to come back to it, I have here waxing moon supports growth and addition, and it's after the storm. We're now growing. You see in these movies a lot, there's a scene of a storm, and then the next scene is all the people rebuilding the ship. That's kind of how I think about this moment in time. This weekend is a rebuild the ship, to get yourself situated, get the clean, get your clothes straight, and put your tie and get it ready to go. It's like Bond. I was watching that new Bond. And he'll go through an action sequence, and then the next thing you see, he's adjusting his cuffs and then getting his clothes back orderly to go and come out of an action sequence. That's how this moon, I think, can be thought of. And so use this weekend, get your stuff together. It'll be over. The Mars, the maximal intensity of the Mars-Saturn perfection with that moon activating it, that's over now. And we're able to use some Venus moon energy, some Pisces energy. And then I have here, just like I always talked about, as preparations. These are pre-eclipse season preparations. For my money during eclipse season, I just turn things down, man. I like to pray, meditate, only do what I'm required to do. And other than that, I've got mala beads, I've got all the spiritual practices I like to do, and I just want to do as much of those as possible. I listen to the Ketu and Rahu mantras. That's how I do eclipse season. Sometimes eclipse season, more often than not, doesn't let you do a lot of that because it's so dynamic of a time. But this is not eclipse season yet, though it will be, because we have Pisces, Aries. We're 2 signs away now from Taurus, from that sign where the lunar eclipse will be on the 19th, 18th, 19th. Now we're only 2 signs away from it. And so, but I have here preparations, pre-eclipse season, this last waxing moon before it becomes eclipse, and then we enter the period between eclipses, and then we're done. But so I just want to say here, it's preparation for eclipse season. Maybe there's things you want to do now, this weekend and early next week, to get ready. And then it's also preparation for that Pisces 2022 transit and that Aries 2022 transit, these 2 moons. So use this transit of the week. Some great energy, great energy. All right, that is the weekly astrology. That is the weekly tarot. And let me get my random number generator. You can hear me here still. Yeah, just a quick moment here out off a camera. But yeah, let's pull a card. Let's see what card can add to our themes here and to what we're confronting this week. It's a fun week of astrology, fun in quotes, right? That's me, the boy whistling in the dark to make this intensity pretend like it's going to be fun. I think it can be, and I would focus on that Mercury and using Mercury-Mars combinations as you're forced into them. Know you have a strong Mercury supporting you this week, and then it can maybe be fun. You'll be like, wow, this is what the universe wants from me, this dynamic action I'm required to do. We can kind of be grateful in a way. All right, so I'm not going to do a rant about malefic energy and how important it is. You can insert that here, and you'll hear enough of those if you watch my channel long enough. All right, so let's get the card. Okay, we've got a card, and that card is, let me see where it is here. We've got here the, okay, the 5 of diamonds. Interesting, suppression, the suppression card. This is Mercury and Taurus. In the tarot systems, and the deck I made is it's a combination of the tarot systems. You know, I studied with Jodorowsky's work, the Crowley Tarot, the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot, some of the contemporary authors. I read quite a bit and studied for many years on tarot and was a practitioner. And so when I went through, this deck is influenced by the tarot tradition, and in that tradition, the 5 numerologically is a number of tension. You know, you can think about the elegance of like a Star of David, how it's 2 triangles. Well, the 5 is the penta, and so the 5 is maybe an inelegant, an odd number that then makes way for the 6 and the elegance of the 6. Even in astrology, we have the 6 is the sextile, but it's 2 trines, right? And those are the easygoing aspects. The 5 is not. The 5 is the square. Anyhow, I don't want to go into like an aspect theory thing, but just know that 6 is an elegant number, and that's confirmed in astrological aspect theory. But in this deck, 5s are tension. They're tension, and you know, Mercury and Taurus as an idea of suppression. I think where I want to read this is from fixed signs. The notion of fixed signs. Taurus is a fixed sign. That's where the lunar eclipse is going to be. And that's where the North Node will be, and eclipses will begin all of 2022. That begins now. Not this week, but the next week. That lunar eclipse, the first of a long series of eclipses on the fixed axis, Taurus, Scorpio. And that's another way to think about this scorpionic moment. Boy, I should have mentioned that the pileup in Scorpio, square Saturn and Aquarius, is actually activating where eclipses will be all in 2022. So this dose this week is something to think about as you prepare for that eclipse cycle in your chart. You know, and Scorpio eclipses, Taurus eclipses. I've been doing some research on that actually yesterday, because I'll be talking about it on a couple of shows coming up. Summer of Love, in 1966 and 1967, the nodes for the first part of that were in Scorpio, Taurus, just the same way, South Node Scorpio, North Node in Taurus. And it was a whole revolution around processing, the human processing with psychedelics. Now, you know, this was a big part of the vibe of the collective around that time, and it was all about love and relationships, reconfiguring our relations. Scorpio, Taurus, fixed signs. It goes back to the deep-seated nature of our family relationships, installing who we are and how we are. Our relationships come from how we are encultured in youth. So that's all in play, and it brings up here, I mean, you know, this is suppression, the word suppression. Sometimes with the tectonic activations, we do suppress and repress things that are uncomfortable, that are driving us unconsciously. So I'm going to just say that this card is maybe related to that, and it is an earth sign. We do have resources, the physical body, the materiality. I think we're dealing here, Venus rules Taurus. I think this is pointing us to maybe there's something with the physical body and with the resources this week that comes up when we have to use that Mercury to understand the dynamic Mars-Saturn activation. Maybe it's telling us that Venus in Capricorn sextile the Mars in Scorpio, that's where we might want to focus our mercurial powers sometimes this week if we can, you know, thinking about this Venus retrograde, thinking about your relationship to the things around you. Do they serve you? Doing some Marie Kondo stuff, like removing things, that's Capricorn, removing things that are holding you down and restricting you so that you can fully flower and function as you're processing a dynamic week. So maybe get in, you know, put some stuff in the closet, clear out an altar space that's simplified so you can have that direct connection using that Mercury to connect. All right, those are some thoughts. That's the weekly astrology. That is the weekly tarot. This is S.J. Anderson. Thank you for being here and thank you for coming to my channel. You can support me by liking this video or subscribing to the channel. You can always go to my website, sjanderson144.com, and schedule an astrology reading, or you can support my Patreon. Helps keep these videos going. Have an awesome day. Talk soon.